I found my father not in the platinum suite with the garden view that I had been paying $12,000 a month for. I found him in the basement of a facility that smelled of stale urine and bleach. He was wearing a t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big and stained with food. He was looking at the wall with a hollow expression that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. The nurse on duty looked at my designer handbag and then at my father with a mixture of pity and judgment. She told me that the family had stopped making payments 2 years ago. 2 years. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a notification from my bank. It was a confirmation of a wire transfer. $12,000 sent successfully to Brenda for medical expenses. Brenda had told me that morning that she needed the money urgently for a new experimental treatment for his mobility. But as I looked at my father shivering in that cold, damp room, I realized there was no treatment. There was no platinum suite. There was only the shiny new Porsche Macan parked outside in the visitor lot. It still had the dealer plates on it. I had walked right past it on my way and thinking it belonged to a successful doctor. Now I knew better. That car was bought with the money meant to keep my father alive. If you have ever trusted a family member with your life savings, only to find out they were using you as a personal bank account while your loved ones suffered, please let me know in the comments. I want to know if I am the only one who was blind enough to let this happen. To understand how I ended up standing in a decrepit nursing home basement in Texas while living in Seattle, you have to understand who I am. My name is Maya. I am 32 years old and I am an anesthesiologist at a level 1 trauma center. My job is to keep people alive while surgeons cut them open. It is a high-pressure job where a single mistake can kill someone. I work 60 to 80 hours a week. My base salary is $350,000 a year. By all accounts, I should be living a life of luxury. I should be driving a Mercedes and living in a penthouse downtown. Instead, I drive a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with a dent in the bumper. I live in a 1-bedroom rental apartment that costs $2,000 a month. I shop at discount grocery stores and I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. My friends think I am eccentric or maybe just miserly. They invite me to trips to Cabo or skiing in Aspen, and I always decline. I tell them I am saving for a house or that I have student loans. The truth is I have been supporting 2 households for the last 3 years. My father Robert suffered a massive stroke 3 years ago. It left him paralyzed on his left side and unable to speak clearly. He needs 24-hour care. He needs physical therapy. He needs speech therapy. When it happened, I was just finishing my residency. I was in debt and I was terrified. Brenda, my stepmother, stepped up. She had been married to my father for 10 years. She told me that she would take care of everything. She said that she found a wonderful facility called Golden Horizon near their home in Austin, Texas. She sent me brochures with pictures of smiling seniors playing chess in a sunlit atrium. She sent me the fee schedule. It was expensive. $12,000 a month for the Platinum Care package, which included private nursing, specialized diet, and daily therapy sessions. I did the math. It was more than half of my take-home pay at the time. But this was my father. This was the man who raised me alone after my mother died when I was 5. This was the man who worked double shifts at a factory to put me through medical school. I could not let him go to a state facility. I could not let him suffer. So I agreed. I told Brenda that I would cover the facility costs. I also agreed to send her $3,000 a month for her own living expenses since she claimed she had to quit her part-time job to visit him daily and manage his care. For 3 years, I have been the perfect daughter. I set up automatic wire transfers. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital on weekends and holidays. I missed my best friend's wedding because I couldn't afford the plane ticket and the hotel. I broke off my engagement with a wonderful man named Mark because he couldn't understand why I wouldn't combine our finances or why I was always broke despite my high income. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself that my sacrifice was keeping my father comfortable and happy. Brenda and her son Justin made sure to reinforce that belief. Justin is 26 years old. He is my stepbrother. He has never held a job for longer than 6 months. He calls himself an entrepreneur, but mostly he just plays video games and posts photos of expensive sneakers on Instagram. I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned why Brenda always had an excuse for why I couldn't video call my father. She would say he was sleeping or he was in therapy or he was having a bad day and didn't want to be seen. Justin would send me photos of my father, but they were always vague. A picture of his hand holding a cup. A picture of him sleeping in a bed with crisp white sheets. I assumed they were taken that day. I assumed the crisp white sheets belonged to the Platinum Suite at Golden Horizon. I was so busy saving lives in Seattle that I didn't have time to question the lives I was financing in Texas. I was tired. I was lonely. And I was completely and utterly being played. The deception was not just about the money. It was about the emotional manipulation. Brenda would call me crying at least once a week. She would tell me how hard it was to see him decline. She would tell me that the doctors recommended a new supplement that cost $500 a bottle. She would tell me that the wheelchair broke and they needed a custom motorized one for $15,000. I never asked for receipts. I just sent the money. I transferred $15,000 for that wheelchair instantly. I ate instant noodles for a month to make up for it. I thought I was buying his comfort. I didn't know I was buying Justin a new home theater system and a closet full of designer streetwear. The cracks started to appear last week. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was an automated voice message from a collections agency looking for Robert. I thought it was a scam. I called Brenda immediately. She laughed it off. She said it was just a mistake with the insurance paperwork and she had already handled it. She sounded so calm, so reassuring. She told me not to worry about anything and just focus on my work. She called me her angel. She said Dad was so lucky to have me. I hung up feeling relieved, but a small knot of anxiety remained in my stomach. That knot was intuition. It was the same intuition that tells me when a patient is crashing before the monitors even start beeping. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't go away. Then I saw the Instagram post. Justin had blocked me years ago, but I had a burner account I used to check on them occasionally. He had posted a story. It was a video of him holding a bottle of champagne in a kitchen I recognized. It was my father's kitchen. But it looked different. There were marble countertops that weren't there before. There were stainless steel appliances that looked brand new. And in the background I heard Brenda's voice. She wasn't crying. She was laughing. She was shouting about how good life was. I looked at the date on the video. It was posted 2 hours after I had wired the money for the wheelchair. That was the moment the blindfold started to slip. I didn't call them. I didn't confront them. I went to my chief of staff and requested 3 days of emergency leave. I got in my car and drove to the airport. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I needed to see the Platinum Suite with my own eyes. I needed to see the $15,000 wheelchair. I needed to know if my sacrifice meant anything or if I had just been fuel for their fire. To understand the magnitude of what they stole from me, you have to understand the gradual nature of the theft. It did not start with a $12,000 wire transfer. It started with small, desperate phone calls that chipped away at my defenses one by one. I remember the first month after I moved my father to Texas. Brenda called me at 2 a.m. Her voice was thick with tears. She told me that the facility fee did not cover the special high-protein organic diet that the neurologist recommended for stroke recovery. She said it was an extra $800 a month. I was a resident then. I was making $60,000 a year and living in a shoebox. But I heard the desperation in her voice. I heard her say that she just wanted Robert to have the best chance at walking again. So I ate instant oatmeal for dinner every night that month and I sent the money. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once I became an attending physician, the money would not matter. But the requests never stopped. They only grew larger and more creative. 6 months later, it was the physical therapy. Brenda told me that the facility's standard therapy was only twice a week and that my father needed daily aggressive intervention if he ever wanted to use his right hand again. She found a private therapist named Dr. Arrests who charged $200 an hour. She said he was a miracle worker. She sent me a video of my father moving his index finger a fraction of an inch as proof. That tiny movement was enough to make me empty my savings account. I authorized $4,000 a month for private therapy. I later learned that Dr. Arrests was a personal trainer at a local gym who came over once a week to stretch my father's limbs for 20 minutes. The rest of the money likely went into Brenda's wardrobe. The manipulation was not just financial. It was surgical emotional warfare. Brenda knew exactly where my weak spots were. She knew I carried a mountain of guilt from moving to Seattle for my residency instead of staying in Texas. She weaponized that guilt with the precision of a sniper. Every time we spoke, she would drop subtle comments about how lonely my father was. She would say things like, "He was asking for you today, Maya," or "He kept looking at the door waiting for his little girl." These words were designed to tear me apart. They made me feel like abandoning my career to move home would be a failure, but staying away was a sin. So I tried to buy my redemption. I thought if I paid for the best care money could buy, it would make up for my absence. I thought if I made sure he had the softest sheets and the best doctors and the most expensive supplements, it would mean I was a good daughter. The toll this took on my personal life was catastrophic. I met Mark during my second year of residency. He was a pediatric surgeon. He was kind and patient, and he loved me in a way I didn't think I deserved. We were together for 2 years. We talked about marriage. We talked about buying a house near the water. But every time we got close to a milestone, Brenda would manufacture a crisis. When Mark proposed and showed me a ring he had picked out, Brenda called to say that my father had developed a severe bedsore that required a specialized air fluidized bed rental costing $3,000 a month. She said the insurance denied it. She said if we didn't get it, infection would set in and he could die of sepsis. I told Mark we had to wait on the engagement. I told him I couldn't plan a wedding when my father was fighting for his life. Mark tried to be understanding. He offered to look at the medical records. He offered to call the facility himself. I refused. I was so brainwashed by Brenda's narrative that I thought Mark was being intrusive. I thought he didn't trust my family. The breaking point came when we were looking at houses. We found a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood. It was perfect. But the down payment required every cent I had saved plus a loan. The day we were supposed to make an offer, Justin called me. It was rare for Justin to call. He usually just texted asking for birthday money. He sounded frantic. He said Brenda had collapsed from exhaustion. He said the stress of caring for Dad was killing her. He said they needed to hire a night nurse so Brenda could sleep or she would have a heart attack and then there would be no one to watch Dad. The cost for a private night nurse was $6,000 a month. I looked at Mark. I looked at the house paperwork. And I chose the night nurse. Mark looked at me with a sadness I will never forget. He told me that he loved me, but he couldn't marry a woman who was already married to her family's dysfunction. He said I wasn't supporting my father, I was enabling parasites. I called him selfish. I screamed at him. He left that night. I cried for 3 days, but I kept sending the checks. I convinced myself that Mark just didn't understand loyalty. I convinced myself that I was the noble one. I was the martyr. Justin's role in this tragedy was less subtle but equally damaging. He played the role of the devoted stepson whenever I asked for updates. He would FaceTime me for exactly 2 minutes. He would angle the camera so I could only see my father's face and nothing of the room around him. He would say, "Hey Maya, look, Dad is waving." My father would make a vague motion with his hand. I would weep with gratitude. Then Justin would say, "Gotta go, Maya, Dad is tired." 5 minutes later I would get a text. "Hey Maya, Dad's iPad is broken and the speech therapist says he needs the new Pro model with the big screen for his communication app. It's $1,200. Can you Venmo me?" I sent the money. I sent money for a new laptop so they could organize his medical records. I sent money for a gaming console that Justin claimed was for hand-eye coordination therapy. I bought everything they asked for because saying no felt like saying I didn't want my father to recover. I lived like a ghost in my own life. My colleagues at the hospital drove Teslas and Porsches. They wore Rolex watches and carried Hermes bags. I drove my rattling Toyota and ate hospital cafeteria food. I picked up every extra shift available. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve. While everyone else was with their families, I was intubating trauma victims in the ER. I told myself I was doing it for love. I didn't know I was paying for Justin's VIP table at the club. I didn't know I was funding Brenda's Botox appointments and her weekly spa days. I was exhausted down to my bone marrow. My hair was thinning from stress. I had dark circles under my eyes that no concealer could hide. I was 32 going on 60. The most painful part to look back on is my father's silence. In the beginning, he could speak a few words. He would say, "Love you" or "Come home." But over the last year, he had stopped speaking entirely during our video calls. Brenda told me it was aphasia. She said it was a natural progression of the stroke. She said he could still understand me, but he just couldn't form the words. She said I shouldn't worry because he was happy. She said he smiled all day long when I wasn't on the phone. I believed her because the alternative was too terrified to contemplate. I believed her because I needed to believe that my sacrifice was working. But deep down I knew. I knew something was wrong in the way a body knows it is sick before the symptoms appear. I felt it in the way Brenda became defensive whenever I asked about visiting. She always had an excuse. The facility is under quarantine for flu. The roads are flooded. We are remodeling the guest room, so you have to stay at a hotel, but the hotels are full for a festival. There was always a reason to keep me away. And I let them keep me away because I was afraid of what I would find. I was afraid that Mark was right. I was afraid that I was just a checkbook with a pulse. Driving to the airport that day felt like driving to my own execution. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The flight to Austin was 4 hours of pure agony. I sat in the middle seat between two strangers staring at the seat back in front of me, rehearsing what I would say. I imagined walking into the Golden Horizon facility. I imagined the receptionist smiling and taking me to the Platinum Suite. I imagined finding my father clean and well cared for. I imagined realizing that I was paranoid and that Brenda was a saint. I prayed for that outcome. I promised God that if my father was okay, I would apologize to Brenda and buy her a car. I would do anything to be wrong. But when I landed in Austin, the air felt heavy. The humidity clung to my skin like a damp shroud. I rented a car and drove straight to the address on the Golden Horizon website. It was a beautiful campus. Manicured lawns. Fountains. Elderly people sitting on benches feeding ducks. It looked exactly like the brochures. I walked up to the front desk feeling a surge of hope. I gave the receptionist my father's name. Robert Vance. She typed it into her computer. She frowned. She typed it again. She looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we don't have a resident by that name." I told her that was impossible. He has been here for 3 years. I pay $12,000 a month. She turned the screen towards me. The last record for Robert Vance was dated 2 years ago. Discharged due to non-payment. Transferred to Sunnyvale Care Center. Sunnyvale. The name sounded cheerful. But the look on the receptionist's face was not. She wrote down the address on a sticky note. It was on the other side of town. The bad side. As I walked back to my rental car, the world started to tilt. The ground felt soft. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Discharged. Non-payment. 2 years. The words echoed in my head like a siren. I had sent nearly $300,000 in the last 2 years alone. Where did it go? The answer was waiting for me at Sunnyvale. And the answer would destroy the person I used to be and birth someone entirely new. Someone cold. Someone dangerous. Someone who was done being difficult and was ready to become a nightmare. The GPS led me away from the manicured lawns of the medical district and towards the eastern edge of the city. The neighborhoods changed rapidly. The oak trees and paved driveways disappeared, replaced by chain-link fences and stray dogs wandering in the street. I pulled into the parking lot of Sunnyvale Care Center. It was a single-story brick building with barred windows. There were weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement. A man in a wheelchair was smoking a cigarette by the front door, his hospital gown flapping open in the wind. I sat in my rental car for a moment, trying to breathe. My chest felt tight, like a heavy stone was crushing my lungs. I walked inside. The smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of neglect. It was a mixture of industrial cleaner, boiled cabbage, and unwashed bodies. The lighting was fluorescent and flickering. The floor was sticky. I found the nurse's station. A woman was eating a sandwich while watching a video on her phone. I asked to see Robert Vance. She didn't even look up. She just pointed down the hall and said, "Room 104 in the basement wing." Basement wing. The words made my blood run cold. I walked down the hallway. I passed rooms with 3 or 4 beds crammed into them. I heard moaning. I heard someone crying for help, but no one came. I reached room 104. The door was open. It was a small room with no windows. There were 2 beds, but one was empty and stripped to the mattress. In the other bed lay a figure, so thin he looked like a skeleton covered in a sheet. I walked closer. The man turned his head. His eyes were sunken. His cheekbones protruded sharply against his gray skin. His hair was matted and long. It took me a full minute to realize that this broken, starving man was my father. "Dad," I whispered. His eyes widened. He tried to lift his head, but he was too weak. A sound came from his throat, a dry, raspy croak. "Maya." I collapsed by the side of the bed. I grabbed his hand. It was cold and rough. His fingernails were long and yellow. I pulled back the sheet and I gasped. He was wearing a diaper that hadn't been changed in hours. There were angry red sores on his heels and hips. The bedsores I had paid thousands of dollars to prevent. The special air mattress I had funded was nowhere to be seen. He was lying on a thin foam pad that looked like it belonged in a prison cell. "Water," he whispered. "Water." I scrambled to find a cup. There was a plastic pitcher on the bedside table, but it was empty and covered in dust. I ran to the bathroom in the hall. The sink was rusted, but the water was cold. I filled the pitcher and ran back. I held the cup to his lips. He drank greedily, choking a little. I wiped his mouth with my sleeve. I looked at him and I saw the terror in his eyes. He wasn't just sick. He was neglected. He was being tortured by indifference. I asked him where Brenda was. He closed his eyes and a single tear leaked out. "Gone," he whispered. "Long time." I sat there for an hour, holding his hand, listening to his ragged breathing. My mind was racing. Every transaction I had made over the last 3 years flashed before my eyes. The $12,000 a month. The physical therapy fees. The expensive supplements. The motorized wheelchair. None of it had come here. Not a single cent. I looked around the room. There were no personal items. No photos of me. No iPad. No new laptop. Just a plastic bag with a few dirty clothes. They had stripped him of everything. They had taken his dignity, his comfort, and his health. And I had paid them to do it. I went to the nurse's station and I demanded his records. The woman finally put down her sandwich when she saw the look on my face. She handed me a thin file. I flipped through it. Medicaid. He was on state-funded Medicaid. Brenda had applied for it 2 years ago, claiming indigence. The government was paying for this hellhole. My money was pure profit for her. I took photos of every page. I took photos of his bed sores. I took photos of the empty pitcher. I called a private ambulance service. I told them to come immediately. I was moving him to the best hospital in Austin. I didn't care what it cost. I would sell my car. I would sell my kidney. I was getting him out of here. Once the ambulance arrived and the paramedics took charge, I got back in my car. I needed to see one more thing. I needed to see where my money had actually gone. I drove to my childhood home. It was in a nice suburb, a place of middle-class comfort. Or at least it used to be. As I turned onto the street, I almost drove past it. The house had been transformed. The old siding was gone, replaced by modern stucco. There was a new stone wall around the perimeter with an electronic gate. The driveway had been widened. I parked down the street and walked closer, keeping to the shadows of the neighbor's hedge. Through the iron bars of the gate I saw it. The Porsche Macan. It was white and gleaming in the afternoon sun. Next to it was a Ford Raptor truck with oversized tires and custom rims. That was Justin's truck. I had paid for that truck while I was driving a 10-year-old Camry. I looked at the landscaping. Exotic palms. A fountain. It looked like a resort. I walked around to the side of the property where the fence was lower. I could see into the backyard. There was a swimming pool. A new in-ground pool with a waterfall feature. Brenda was lying on a lounge chair wearing a designer swimsuit and holding a glass of wine. She was laughing into her phone. Justin was grilling steaks on a massive stainless steel outdoor kitchen setup. I could smell the expensive meat. I could hear the music thumping from high-end outdoor speakers. They were having a party. A Tuesday afternoon party. While my father lay in his own filth begging for water 5 miles away, they were grilling ribeyes and drinking Chardonnay. The contrast made me physically ill. I vomited into the bushes. I wiped my mouth and looked at them again. This wasn't just greed. This was evil. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my father's life. They had stolen his comfort. They had stolen the last years of his existence and traded them for luxury cars and pool parties. I watched Brenda gesture with her hand, the sunlight catching on a diamond bracelet. I recognized that bracelet. I had sent her $3,000 last Christmas for car repairs because she said her transmission blew. She had bought diamonds instead. I felt a shift inside me. The grief and the shock were evaporating, replaced by something cold and hard. It was the same feeling I got in the operating room when a patient started to hemorrhage. The panic vanished. The emotion shut down. My heart rate slowed. I became a machine. A machine designed to fix the problem. I took out my phone. I didn't call the police yet. The police would just arrest them. That was too easy. That was too quick. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted to dismantle their lives piece by piece. I wanted to take everything they had built with my money and burn it to the ground. I remembered the security system. Years ago, before I left for Seattle, I had installed a camera system for my father. Brenda had told me it was broken and she had replaced it with a new one that she controlled. But I knew Brenda. She was lazy. She likely never replaced the hardware, she just changed the Wi-Fi password. I pulled up the old app on my phone. The device was offline. But if I could get close enough to the router, I might be able to bridge the connection or see if the local storage was still active. I crept closer to the side of the house near the garage where the router used to be. My phone searched for networks. There it was. Vance Manor. The password used to be Dad's birthday. I tried it. Incorrect. I tried Justin's birthday. Incorrect. I tried the word Porsche. Connected. The stupidity of their arrogance was my greatest weapon. I accessed the network. I scanned for devices. I found the cameras. They weren't broken. They were active. Brenda had just revoked my access user. I used the admin backdoor I had set up 5 years ago as a failsafe. The feed popped up on my screen. Crystal clear 4K video and audio. I could hear their conversation perfectly now. I put in my earbuds. I crouched in the bushes and I listened. I needed them to say it. I needed a confession. I needed them to admit that they knew exactly what they were doing. And what I heard next was the final nail in their coffin. The audio through my earbuds was so clear it felt like Brenda was standing right next to me, whispering her poison into my ear. I watched her on my phone screen as she took a long sip of her wine and reclined further into her lounge chair. She looked so relaxed, so satisfied. Justin was flipping a thick ribeye steak on the grill, the grease popping and sizzling. He looked over at his mother and laughed. Mommy said, "We should really think about that addition to the garage. I need more space for the Raptor and I'm thinking about getting a bike." Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "Patience, Justin," she said. "We just got the pool finished. If we ask Maya for too much too fast, she might start looking at the statements. We need to wait for the surgery." Justin grinned, showing his teeth. "Oh right, the brain surgery. That was a stroke of genius, Mom. When are we telling her?" Brenda checked her manicured nails. "Next Monday," she said. "I'll call her in the morning and sound like I haven't slept. I'll tell her the doctors found a new blockage. I've already looked up the pricing for private neurosurgeons in Houston. We'll ask for $50,000. That should cover your wedding and the garage addition with plenty left over for my trip to Scottsdale." I felt a coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. It wasn't the kind of cold that makes you shiver. It was the kind of cold that turns water into ice. A physical hardening of my soul. They weren't just stealing my money. They were planning a heist on my future. They were using my father's failing health as a script for a horror movie where I was the only victim. Justin laughed again. Manny said, "She is so easy. Sometimes I almost feel bad for her. She works like a dog in that hospital while we live like royalty. Does she really believe all that crap you tell her about the physical therapist?" Brenda laughed a sharp, ugly sound. "Maya wants to believe it because she's weak," she said. "She's consumed by guilt. She thinks she can buy her way out of being a bad daughter. As long as I keep her feeling guilty, she will keep the faucet open. And honestly, it's not like Robert knows the difference. He's basically a vegetable. He's lucky we even found that Sunnyvale place. It's better than he deserves after the way he used to nag me about my spending." I closed the app. I sat in the dirt behind the hedge and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe for a long moment. The woman I had called mom for 10 years. The boy I had treated like a brother. They saw my father as a vegetable and me as a faucet. Something inside me didn't just break. It was incinerated. The Maya who cared about family loyalty and forgiveness was gone. In her place was the doctor who knew exactly where to cut to make the patient bleed out without ever feeling the blade. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my trousers. I walked back to my rental car with a steady gait. My mind was no longer a jumble of pain. It was a spreadsheet. It was a tactical map. I drove back to the hotel near the hospital where my father was now being admitted. I pulled out my laptop and I didn't sleep. I started by calling David. David was the corporate counsel for my hospital system back in Seattle, but he was also a close friend from medical school. I told him everything. I told him about the $12,000 a month. I told him about Sunnyvale. I told him about the Porsche and the pool. David was silent for a long time. Then he spoke in a voice that was as cold as mine. Maya, he said, this isn't just a family dispute. This is elder abuse. This is wire fraud. This is grand larceny. You have the bank records. You have the photos of your father's condition. You have the recorded confession from the cameras. You have enough to bury them. But if you go to the police now, they'll just get a public defender and drag this out for years. You want them to hurt. You want them to lose everything before they ever see a courtroom. I told him I wanted exactly that. I wanted them to feel the floor drop out from under them while they were still smiling. David told me he would draft the paperwork. He told me to find my mother's will. My mother had died when I was 5, but she was the one who had bought the house with her inheritance. My father had always told me that the house was her legacy for me. I needed to see the deed. I called the county clerk's office the next morning. I paid for an expedited title search. While I waited, I hired a private investigator named Marcus. I gave him the Wi-Fi password to the house. I gave him Brenda's social security number. I told him I wanted every secret, every debt, every hidden account. Marcus called me back 6 hours later. Maya, he said, your stepmother is even dumber than she sounds. She didn't buy those cars outright. She took out high-interest loans in your father's name using a forged power of attorney. She's been using your wire transfers to make the monthly payments, but she's behind on both of them. The Porsche is 2 months past due. The Raptor is 3. She's been gambling too. I found accounts at 3 different online casinos. She's lost nearly $60,000 in the last 6 months alone. That's why she needs the $50,000 for the fake surgery. She's about to lose the cars. I felt a grim satisfaction. They were already standing on a crack in the ice. I just needed to jump. The title search came back an hour later. It was better than I could have imagined. My mother hadn't just left the house to my father. She had left it in a trust. The terms were specific. My father had a life estate. He could live there until he died. Brenda had a secondary life estate, but only if she was actively cohabitating with and providing primary care for Robert Vance in the residence. If Robert was moved to an external facility for more than 90 days, without a medical necessity certified by 2 independent doctors, the life estate terminated immediately, and the property reverted to me as the remainder man. Brenda had moved my father to Sunnyvale 2 years ago. She had effectively forfeited her right to the house 700 days ago. She was a squatter in a $2 million home. And she didn't even know it. I looked at the photos of the new pool and the stucco. She had spent my money to increase the value of a house that she no longer had a legal right to step foot in. I almost wanted to thank her. I spent the next 48 hours gathering my weapons. I got the medical report from the hospital. The doctors confirmed that my father was suffering from severe malnutrition, dehydration, and stage 4 pressure sores. They stated in writing that there was no medical reason for him to be in a facility like Sunnyvale, and that his condition was a direct result of criminal neglect. I had the bank statements showing the $500,000 I had sent. I had the title report. I had the private investigator's findings on the forged power of attorney. I had the audio of them laughing about the brain surgery scam. I called Brenda on Friday morning. I made my voice shake. I played the part of the faucet. Brenda, I said, I saw your message about the new blockage. I'm so scared. I've been looking at my finances. I think I can get the $50,000. Brenda's voice was instantly sweet. Oh Maya, she said. You are such a blessing. I knew you would come through for your father. The doctors say we need the deposit by Monday morning, or they'll lose the surgery slot. I told her I would bring the money in person. I told her I wanted to celebrate Justin's engagement party with them on Saturday night. I told her I was so proud of my brother. She was so greedy she didn't even find it suspicious that I was flying back down so soon. She just saw the dollar signs. She told me she would have the champagne waiting. I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the hotel mirror. The dark circles were still there, but my eyes were bright with a predatory light. I wasn't just bringing money. I was bringing the end of their world. I was bringing the wrecking ball. I called the moving company. I called the locksmith. I called the sheriff's department to schedule a civil standby, and then I called the company that Brenda had hired to build the pool. I found out she still owed them $20,000 for the final milestone. I paid them, but I didn't pay them to finish the job. I paid them for something much more dramatic. The stage was set. Justin's engagement party was going to be the social event of the season for their shallow friends. There would be catering. There would be music. There would be the white Porsche and the Ford Raptor. And there would be me, the silent partner, the bank, the girl who was done being difficult. I looked at the black binder on the bed. It contained every piece of paper that would turn their lives into ash. I felt a surge of energy that I hadn't felt in years. For 3 years I had been tired. Now I was wide awake. And I was hungry. The engagement party was in full swing when I arrived. The driveway was lined with luxury cars that belonged to Justin's friends. The bass from the DJ booth thumped against the new stucco walls. The air smelled of expensive cologne and charcoal smoke. I walked through the iron gates holding a heavy gift box wrapped in silver paper. I was wearing a red dress. Not a modest work dress, but a dress that screamed power. It was the color of blood and warning signs. Justin was the first to see me. He was holding a beer and wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He jogged over with a wide fake smile plastered on his face. Maya, he shouted over the music. You made it. And you brought a gift. He had the box in my hands. I smiled back. I did. It's heavy, I said. It contains everything you deserve. Brenda materialized next to him. She was wearing a white sequin gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress. She hugged me. The smell of her perfume was overpowering. It was the smell of money she hadn't earned. Did you bring the deposit? She whispered in my ear. The doctors are waiting. I pulled back and looked her in the eye. I nodded. Everything is taken care of, Brenda. I just want to make a toast first. I want everyone to know how much you've done for Dad. Her eyes lit up. She clapped her hands. Everyone listen up, she yelled into a microphone she grabbed from the DJ. My stepdaughter Maya is here. She's a big shot doctor from Seattle, and she wants to say a few words. The music lowered. The crowd of about 50 people turned to look at me. I stepped up to the patio. I looked at the pool with its custom waterfall. I looked at the outdoor kitchen. I looked at the Porsche parked prominently on the lawn as a display piece. I took the microphone. Thank you everyone for coming, I began, my voice steady and amplified. We are here to celebrate Justin's engagement. But we are also here to celebrate the incredible financial management of my stepmother Brenda. A ripple of polite applause went through the crowd. Brenda preened, adjusting her diamond necklace. For the past 3 years, I continued. I have sent $12,000 a month to Brenda to care for my paralyzed father. That is over $400,000. Brenda looked confused. The smile faltered slightly. She stepped forward. Maya, honey, we don't need to discuss numbers. I ignored her. I also sent $50,000 for medical equipment. I sent money for a wheelchair. I sent money for therapy. And Brenda was so magical with that money that she managed to turn it into a swimming pool. She turned it into a Porsche. She turned it into this party. The crowd went silent. People started exchanging glances. Justin stepped forward looking angry. Maya, stop it. You're drunk. I'm not drunk, Justin, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous chill. I'm just observant. Because while you are grilling steaks on a $5,000 grill, my father is lying in a basement at Sunnyvale Care Center covered in his own waste begging for water. A gasp went through the crowd. Brenda lunged for the microphone, but I sidestepped her. She screamed, "You liar. How dare you? He's in the best facility in Texas." "Is he?" I asked. I reached into the silver box. I pulled out the photos I had taken at Sunnyvale. I threw them into the crowd. They fluttered down like confetti. Photos of the bedsores. Photos of the dirty room. Photos of my father's skeletal frame. "Look at them," I commanded. "Look at what paid for your champagne." A woman in the front row picked up a photo and covered her mouth in horror. Brenda was shaking now. Her face was a mask of panic. "Get out," she screeched. "Get off my property." "That's the funny thing, Brenda," I said, pulling out a thick document from the box. "This isn't your property." She froze. "What are you talking about?" I held up the deed. "This is the deed to this house. My mother bought it. She left it in a trust. The terms were very specific. You have a life estate, Brenda. Do you know what that means? It means you can live here as long as you are personally caring for Robert Vance in this residence. But the moment he is moved to a facility for more than 90 days, your life estate terminates." I walked towards her, holding the paper like a sword. "You moved him to Sunnyvale 730 days ago. You terminated your own rights 2 years ago. You have been squatting in my house. You have been spending my money to renovate my property. And as the legal owner, I have made some changes." Brenda was backing away, shaking her head. No, that's not true. We're married. It's community property. Not this house," I said. "Read the will. But don't worry about packing. Because I didn't just reclaim the title. I sold it." "Sold it?" she whispered. "To who?" I pointed to the front gate. On cue, the heavy rumble of diesel engines filled the air. 3 massive yellow bulldozers with the logo of a demolition company were idling at the entrance. Behind them were 2 police cruisers and a tow truck. "I sold it to a developer," I said. "He doesn't want the house, Brenda. He wants the land. He's tearing it down. Starting today." The color drained from Justin's face. He looked at the police cars. He looked at the Porsche. He looked at me. "You can't do this," he stammered. "This is insane. We have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," I said, mimicking the Miranda warning. "Because those officers aren't here for the eviction. They are here for the wire fraud. They are here for the identity theft. And they are definitely here for the elder abuse." The police officers walked through the gate. One of them held up a warrant. "Brenda Vance and Justin Vance," he announced. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of first-degree felony injury to an elderly individual and theft of property over $300,000. Brenda screamed. It was a primal sound of a trapped animal. She turned to run towards the back gate, but an officer was already there. They grabbed her arms. The handcuffs clicked shut. The sound was crisp and final, cutting through the murmur of the shocked crowd. Justin tried to blend into the crowd of his friends, but they parted like the Red Sea. They wanted nothing to do with him. The officer grabbed him by the lapel of his expensive suit and spun him around. I watched as they were dragged past the pool they had built with my father's suffering. I watched as Brenda begged the officers, saying it was all a mistake, saying I was crazy. She looked at me with eyes full of hate. "I'll sue you," she screamed. "I'll take everything." "You have nothing, Brenda," I said calmly. "The bank has already frozen the accounts. The tow truck is here for the Porsche and the Raptor. And this house is about to be a pile of rubble." The tow truck driver was already hooking up the Porsche. The sound of the winch whining was music to my ears. Justin watched his beloved truck being lifted onto the flatbed, tears streaming down his face. "My truck," he sobbed. "I just put new rims on it." "You never paid for those rims, Justin," I said, walking past him. "My father's bedsores paid for them." The guests were fleeing now, scrambling to get their cars out of the driveway before the bulldozers blocked them in. The party was over. The illusion was shattered. I walked over to the demolition foreman, who was waiting by the gate with a clipboard. He looked at the chaos and then at me. "You sure about this, lady?" he asked. "It's a nice house." "It was a house of horrors," I said, signing the authorization form. "Tear it down. I want the ground salted." I stood there as the police cars drove away with Brenda and Justin in the back. I stood there as the first bulldozer roared to life and drove through the perfectly manicured hedge, destroying the landscape instantly. The metal bucket smashed into the new stone wall that Brenda had been so proud of. The sound of crunching stone and splintering wood filled the air. It was violent. It was destructive. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I took out my phone and opened the banking app. I canceled the scheduled transfer of $50,000. I used that money to pay the demolition crew's rush fee instead. I watched the bucket swing towards the new garage addition. The structure crumbled like a house of cards. The dust rose into the air, coating the swimming pool in a layer of gray grit. The water turned murky. The symbol of their greed was being erased one bucket load at a time. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sadness. I felt lighter. The weight of 3 years of lies was gone. The burden of being the good daughter to bad people was lifted. I walked to my rental car as the roof of the master bedroom caved in. I didn't look back. I had a father to pick up. I had a life to reclaim. And I had a plane to catch. The vampires had been exposed to the sunlight, and they had turned to dust. The demolition took 2 days to complete. By the time the last dump truck hauled away the debris of what used to be my childhood home, the lot was nothing but a patch of flat brown earth. The neighbors probably complained about the noise and the dust, but I didn't care. I paid the fines along with the demolition fees. It was a small price to pay for cleansing the earth of so much toxicity. David handled the legal fallout with the efficiency of a shark sensing blood in the water. Brenda and Justin didn't have money for a private attorney, so they were assigned a public defender who looked as exhausted as I used to feel. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The bank records showing the misappropriation of funds. The medical reports detailing the severe neglect of a vulnerable elderly person. The forged power of attorney documents. It was a prosecutor's dream. Brenda tried to plead not guilty. She tried to paint herself as a victim of circumstances, saying that she was overwhelmed and that I had abandoned them. But the camera footage I retrieved from the cloud server destroyed her defense. The jury didn't look kindly on a woman sipping wine by a new pool while joking about letting her husband rot. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict took 2 hours. Brenda was found guilty of first-degree felony injury to an elderly individual and theft of property over $200,000. In Texas, the sentencing for elder abuse is severe. The judge gave her 12 years in a state penitentiary. I was there when they read the sentence. She looked at me, but I didn't see the arrogant woman who bragged about her diamonds. I saw a broken old woman who was about to spend the rest of her life in a cage much smaller than the one she had put my father in. Justin got a lighter sentence because he turned on his mother in exchange for a plea deal. He testified that she was the mastermind and that he just did what he was told. He got 3 years for fraud and conspiracy. But the real punishment for Justin wasn't prison. It was the reality that awaited him on the outside. He had no skills. He had no work history. He had a felony record. And he had no mommy to fund his lifestyle. The last I heard of him before I flew back to Seattle was that he was crying in the holding cell, asking if he could keep his sneakers. The guard told him no. I brought my father back to Seattle with me. It wasn't easy. The flight required a medical transport team which cost $20,000. I paid it without blinking. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital so I could be close to him. I hired 2 private nurses to cover the day shifts while I worked, and I took care of him at night. The first few months were a struggle. He was weak and traumatized. He would flinch whenever someone raised a hand near him, thinking he was going to be hit or ignored. He hoarded food under his pillow because he was used to being hungry. It broke my heart every time I found a stale roll or a packet of crackers hidden in his sheets. But slowly, with patience and love, he started to come back to me. The bedsores healed, leaving deep scars but no infection. His weight returned. The hollow look in his eyes was replaced by a spark of recognition. He couldn't speak much, but he could squeeze my hand. One evening about 6 months after I brought him home, I was sitting by his bed reading a book. It was raining outside, the gentle Seattle rain that washes everything clean. He reached out and touched my cheek. I looked at him. He struggled to form the words, his mouth working hard against the paralysis. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you." 2 words. They were worth more than the $500,000 I had lost. They were worth more than the house I had destroyed. I learned a lot about myself in that fire. I learned that I had been using money as a shield. I thought that if I paid enough, I could protect the people I loved from pain. I thought that being a good provider was the same as being a good daughter. But I was wrong. Money is just a tool. It can build a house or it can destroy one. It can buy a Porsche or it can buy a nursing team. The value isn't in the currency itself, but in the intention behind it. I had let my guilt blind me to the truth. I had let my fear of confrontation allow monsters to feed on my family. I also learned to forgive myself. I stopped blaming the Maya who sent the checks. She was doing the best she could with the information she had. She was acting out of love, even if it was misguided. I made peace with the fact that the money was gone. I would never get it back. Brenda had spent it all on perishable luxury. But I was still young. I was still a doctor. I could earn more money. What I couldn't earn back was time. So I stopped working 80-hour weeks. I cut back to 40. I stopped picking up extra shifts on holidays. I spent Christmas with my father watching old movies and eating mashed potatoes. It wasn't a glamorous life. It wasn't the life of jet-setting trips and designer clothes that my colleagues lived. But it was real. And it was mine. I even called Mark. I didn't expect him to take me back. Too much damage had been done. But we met for coffee. I told him he was right. I told him everything. He listened quietly. He didn't say I told you so. He just reached across the table and held my hand. We aren't back together yet. Trust takes time to rebuild, just like a house. But we are talking. We're taking it slow. And for the first time in 3 years, I am not hiding anything from him. I am not hiding my bank account or my family secrets. I am an open book, and that freedom is intoxicating. Last week, I received a letter from the Texas Department of Corrections. It was a request from Brenda to put me on her visitation list. She wanted to see me. She wanted to apologize. Or maybe she wanted money for the commissary. I didn't open the letter. I didn't burn it either. I just wrote distinct words on the envelope. Return to sender. No longer at this address. I dropped it in the mailbox and walked away. I walked to the park where my nurse had taken my father for some fresh air. I saw him sitting in his wheelchair watching a group of children play soccer. He was wearing a thick wool coat and a scarf I had knitted for him. He looked warm. He looked safe. I sat down on the bench next to him. He turned and smiled at me. It was a crooked smile, half of his face still frozen, but it reached his eyes. I took his hand. It was warm. We sat there in silence watching the leaves fall. I thought about the white Porsche being towed away. I thought about the pool full of dust. And then I looked at my father's hand in mine. I realized that I was the richest woman in the world. Not because of my salary, but because I knew exactly where my value lay. It wasn't in what I could give. It was in who I was willing to fight for. If you have aging parents, do not just send money. Visit them. Check their living conditions. Trust your instincts. The people who claim to love them the most might be the ones hurting them the most. Do not let guilt make you blind. And if something feels wrong, act immediately. Burn the bridge if you have to. Tear down the house if you must. But save the people who matter. If this story made you feel something, hit the like button. If you think justice was served for Brenda and Justin, leave a comment below. And if you know someone who is blindly trusting a caregiver, share this video with them. It might just save a life.